Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello, folks, and thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. With this year's crop season coming to a close before too long, growers are looking ahead to next year. And farmer leader Brent Renner with the United Soybean Board is encouraging farmers to think about their soil health. In fact, he's part of a program called Farmers for Soil Health, and recently I had the chance to ask him what Farmers for Soil Health really was.
A new initiative that we're excited to be a part of. It was developed by farmers for farmers, and we're encouraging those who have not gotten used to new practices like cover crops and other things to dive into that space and also have the technical assistance to go along with it.
That's huge. When people look at bringing some of these new practices to their farms, oftentimes it's going to require changing the operations we've done forever. So how is Farmers for Soil Health going to make that easier?
Absolutely. So as I said, we will provide some technical assistance to go with it. There will be cost sharing to overcome some of the risks that they think they might have, and it'll also provide farmers with direct money to do all those things.
And when you say technical assistance, this is expertise. This is a real person who's read the rules of the program and understands the ground in order to help guide the farmer.
Yep. I know from personal experience that cover crops is something that doesn't come without risk. So we're doing everything we can to educate farmers on what those risks are and do everything possible to overcome those risks and be successful doing it.
Absolutely. So Farmers for Soil Health, it's been out, it's fairly new.
Yep.
How have the conversations been with the industry? Are farmers excited to have this opportunity?
Absolutely, and it's kind of a multifaceted approach. It's not just cost share, it's not just technical assistance, but it's also maybe matching farmers with a marketplace that can further their experience with dollars available to do certain practices for certain things.
A marketplace. That is very cool. This thing just keeps growing.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting.
What would you tell farmers who are on the fence about trying some of these new practices? They're on the fence about reaching out for help, perhaps, for some of these new additions and sustainable practices.
I would say, for sure, farmers looking at their budget for next year, it's pretty tight. So if there's dollars available out there to try these new things and have the confidence to try these new things and be successful doing them, by all means, look us up and see what we can do to help.
Have you had the opportunity to try some of these practices on your operation?
I have, and with mixed results. Like I said, they come with inherent risks, especially for someone that moves as far north as I do. Cover crops are not a perfect fit for every operation. We understand that. We can take some maybe acres that they fit better on and implement them there.
Brent, we're 1 year into Farmers for Soil Health. Do you know how many farmers it's worked with as a program?
Yeah, so we've got about 300 farmers and about 90,000 acres so far, and we're excited to increase that exponentially over the next several years.
So if folks want to be a part of that growth, where would you send them to learn more about Farmers for Soil Health?
Very simple. Go to farmersforsoilhealth.com.
Farmersforsoilhealth.com. We can handle that. Brent Renner, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us, and good luck in harvest this year.
Thank you. We're excited to get there.
For details on how the program works in your neck of the woods, you can learn more at farmersforsoilhealth.com. Save instantly when you buy 2 or more eligible Firestone Ag tires during the Firestone Fall into Savings promotion, now until October 31st. Visit firestoneag.com or contact your local certified ag dealer. And it's time to talk markets. Joining us this week to break down the commodity markets is Derek Hermish, a manager with Pinion. And Derek, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Yeah, you bet, Mike. Happy to be here.
Corn, soybean harvest continues throughout the heartland of the country. Yield conversations are everywhere. Derek, what are you hearing from your contacts across the country? How is this corn harvest shaping up?
I am hearing it's an excellent harvest. I mean, it varies a little bit. You know, we deal with customers all over. A lot of my customers, you know, in the Plain States, and if you're on the eastern side of the Plain States, it's phenomenal, especially in Kansas, Nebraska. I would say Nebraska, you know, maybe just getting fired up, but that really goes for both corn and beans. There was some concerns about what the bean crop would be with how the month finished, you know, from the middle of August to the middle of September, but it doesn't seem to have dragged it that much. And everywhere else, I mean, As far as I can tell, I think the record crop that the USDA has projected is well within its right to be estimated there.
All right. Derek, then as you look around the world, it seems as though from the supply side, we are going to have the corn on hand this year. From the demand side of the ledger, are exports picking up enough to keep some wind in corn's back here?
They are. So, in the quarterly stocks report, as we finished up the marketing year from last year, there was an 84 million bushel reduction. It was 84 million less than what the trade estimates were. And you kind of, we're going to, with the USDA report, you kind of expected that to be transferred through. And if you see the ending stocks projection, if it's above 2 billion, what the market was kind of looking for, if it's above 2 billion for corn or below 2 billion, that could kind of set your parameters for, hey, can we stabilize, at this little higher area that we've rallied to off the contract lows? Or, are we due for, a little bit more of a step back and a sideways grind to lower as we go through harvest pressure? But the demand has been excellent. You don't have that surprise demand from China that you really need to push the corn market higher with this, this big a production year. There have been some unknown flash sales, quite a few of them here recently. And I would have thought the market would be a little bit more excited about them, but it doesn't seem to be reading it as China, and I think maybe it's being read as more it's going to Europe, and they're just not tagged with a country yet, and that's why you're seeing the group of unknown flash sales.
Interesting. Now, on the soybean side, are we seeing unknown or Chinese buyers step in at all on soybeans?
You are. There's been ample Chinese buying. There's been. I think we've actually, our exports were not great last year, but we are now to the point where we've surpassed, export sales on the soybeans just as compared to last year. But it hasn't been those big whoppers like, 5 and 6 million metric tons that we would see at times, in kind of that August, maybe September timeframe from China in years past. But there's been consistent, 2 or 3 every week that are, and I said 500,000 is what I meant, but you're seeing, 100, 200,000 flash sales to China, and they've been consistent. So China is still buying.
All right. Any action right now for growers looking out to that 25 crop? Are you hedging either corn or beans at this point?
I do think it is wise to have a start on next year's corn. It's a little trickier on soybeans because, we've had such a revolution in the domestic demand space with the increase in crush because of the, this carbon credit stuff. But that's a little shaky right now. And I would not hesitate for the producer that wants to get a start on next year's beans. It's just, they're always trickier, but yes, you've got December corn above 450 and that, may not work real great on everybody's books. It does when you have a production year like this, but I do think it is worth stepping out there and making sure you get a start.
Let's turn very quickly to the livestock market here, Derek. Feeder cattle, we're seeing some movement there. Any advice for producers given the volatility in that market right now?
So the advice is just kind of the same as it's been for me for producers, is that prices are historically high. And we had the last 3 years, kind of really before 24, you had from 2020 to 23, we had consistently bullish market, and we got back to contract highs, historical all-time highs. And you can't, for me, it's hard for me to picture the next 3 years carrying through the same. So I do think you want to be more aggressive on the hedging, standpoint. But as far as observations, we had some movement in the feeder cattle spreads that kind of brought them back to average, and makes me think maybe the prices do stick around a little longer.
All right, things to watch on the livestock sector as well. Derek Hermish, manager at Pinion, thank you so much for speaking with us this week.
You bet, Mike.
We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness after this.
Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Max Armstrong here for a moment or two with Mike Pearson. The name Cargill is not unfamiliar in farm country, to be sure. Cargill has been a participant in agriculture, a partner with farmers for quite some time, but finding new ways to do it these days. Jenna Sievers from Cargill visits with us about grain marketing and the challenge that it is. It never gets easier, does it, Jenna?
It doesn't seem like it's going to.
You live on a farm yourself, and that's one of the tasks that is so important, marketing successfully.
Yes, I do live on a farm and farm with my husband and his family currently. And so grain marketing is a thing that keeps us going every year and allows us to come back and do it the next year. So although it's probably not the favorite job, but it's definitely a necessary one.
Am I correct? There are 3 different ways that Cargill interacts with growers and allows them to participate in terms of marketing their crops.
Yes, there is. So Cargill has a program called Cargill Elevate, been around for a few years now, and definitely we have some history in the grain marketing beyond that. But currently we offer 3 different ways, one being Cargill Market Insights. And so with that, it's a free platform. So get that information sent directly to your phone via text message first thing in the morning, kind of gives you an update of what's going on. And then in the afternoon, you'll get a podcast of a recap of myself or a colleague giving you a kind of a rundown of what has happened that day and what we're looking forward to. And then secondly, we have a variety of solutions depending on what your bias is and what you want to protect, or maybe participate even in the markets that allows you to do that with Cargill on cash grain that you have. And then thirdly is our paid service, and that is called Cargill Elevate Plus, which we actually just rolled that out a couple months ago, and we are excited to have producers in that. We're definitely seeing a need for it in this grain market that we are dealing with today. So those are the 3 different ways that we have currently.
Cargill Elevate Plus. Give us a little more detail on that. How does that work?
Yeah, Cargill Elevate Plus is a paid premium service, and so it is an annual contract, and with that you get a lot of different things. First being cash recommendations. So if you're not paying attention and you want someone to give you those key indicators of, hey, this is a good time to go ahead and make a sale, that will come directly to your phone. And we've also partnered up with Bushel. So when you sign up for Cargill Elevate Plus, you also get a subscription to Bushel Farm. So what that really allows you to do is put that information in there. And that way, when you're ready to make that sale, all that information's on your phone, iPad, computer, whatever you have handy. So as we know, these markets are volatile. That opportunity window is getting pretty short. And so we don't want you to have to wait to make that decision. Along with that, USDA updates, recommendations, podcasts, you get a weekly summary in your inbox that goes more in depth, and all of those different things. And we're always looking to build that out more of how do we service and help our farmers even more as we move through this grain market.
The grower's comfort factor varies from one farm to another, and some really want to have that hands-on approach to be sure, but you have something for everyone there, it seems.
Yeah, so if you're more in the space of you keep track of it every day, maybe you're those very few and far between who actually enjoy grain marketing, you can definitely utilize the different solutions we offer to be able to express that bias and protect maybe that profit level you want to ensure, or maybe you're really bearish and you want to make sure that you've got everything covered. You can definitely do that within our solutions, and then just keep up to date using Market Insights or Elevate Plus if that fits you better.
So for the farmer who wants to explore in greater detail, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, best way to do that, head over to Cargill Ag, and we have that opportunity for them to see what fits them in that moment, because we know that changes every year as well. Not every 2 years is the same, and not every 2 farms are the same.
Jenna, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Max.
Jenna Sievers joining us here from Cargill. Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, Greg Solier joins us now. And Greg, Pacific Northwest, what are you watching up in that part of the country this week?
Well, quite uneventful weather, while all the headlines have been either across the plains or the Corn Belt because of this idyllic harvest pattern, or of course across the southeastern part of the country, namely and through Florida. It's the Pacific Northwest, which is relatively uneventful the past couple of weeks. A system from time to time. We are getting into the wetter season. Had a nice trough move through last week. We've got another one weaker scheduled as week wears on this week. So there'll be some degree of moisture with time into the western states. Weak disturbance here. Otherwise, yeah, pretty good freeze and frost and an effective end to the growing season from the southern Canadian prairie back as far south as maybe Kansas. Of course, you bring the jet stream southward, where off the map here, off the charts, you bring the tropical features northward across the western Atlantic, but that's going to be a relaxing setup, so warmth will return. And some wet weather too across northern California, the Pacific Northwest, but light amounts, fair coverages. Here's this boundary where warmth and some heat work back in across the Dakotas and southern Canadian prairie, and maybe a thunderstorm or two. So it's one temperature pattern or oscillation versus the other, but overall, pretty good go of it for outdoor work and harvest operations with that in mind. Maybe a sprinkle early in the week across the Central Valleys, heat across the southwestern states, maybe bubbling up an afternoon thunderstorm. Frost potential all the way down to parts of Kansas. Some of those winter wheat producers are not planting because it's too dry, too drought-ridden. drought-ridden, and no real rain in the forecast here for the next couple of weeks for openers. So dryness and drought here, more wind, and watch the fire potential. A couple of thunderstorms over the mountain bases of Utah, and a couple of showers into the valleys of California. Spotty stuff at best there.
The past couple weeks have seen great harvest weather across the northern Corn Belt. Greg, does that continue next week?
It will, but remember, safety first. We'll get it done early and often this year, but not before a little frost scraping off the windshield. We had that last week, and a little more pronounced one that we end the growing season down to about Interstate 80, some frost to about I-70. No big deal with crop maturity. A couple of sprinkles downwind of the Great Lakes region. Back across the High Plains area is getting a warm-up underway. Watch the fire potential. Dry, tender vegetation, hot engine equipment. We've had a number of those from the Dakotas in through parts of Illinois, and idyllic harvest weather continues on. A big warm-up, increasing south wind across the plains with high pressure and control down across the Ohio Valley. Of course, a cleanup and recovery ongoing here across the southeastern states from Helene and Milton. Meanwhile, a quiet weather pattern on the southern plains, some heat, maybe a thunderstorm into the Rio Grande Valley. Again, we want to get winter wheat planting going, but we're not because of dryness in the soils, drought-ridden conditions, and no organized rain, although we're seeing some lowering of pressures, Mike, and maybe something cooking in the western Gulf later in the week.
All right, Greg. Well, it has certainly been action-packed along the eastern seaboard. What do you see next week?
Overall, again, a pretty quiet weather picture. Expected no major systems, but a feel of almost November in the air with wind, some rain sprinkles downwind of the Great Lakes region, and yeah, why not throw a snowflake up towards Hudson Bay, James Bay? It is that time of the year. Seasonal temperatures across the east with cooler air and some frost potential all the way down to the Ozarks. Expected early to middle parts of the week. That'll translate into the central Appalachians. Cleanup and recovery still going on here. A freeze from the St. Lawrence River Valley back over the western Corn Belt, much of the Midwest for that matter. Idyllic outdoor work and harvest weather with a warm-up getting underway. A weak system down across the Rio Grande. Cleanup and recovery from Milton across Florida. Shower activity moving off the Carolinas with cooler, drier air, less humidity in the air. Dew points will finally come down across the Tennessee Valley and back into the mid-Atlantic region as we move on through the end portion of the week. We see a little lowering of pressures here. We'll keep an eye on that. There's another feature out across the southern areas of the Caribbean. So things are getting, again, a little more active across the Gulf Coast just because of October. Doesn't mean things are going to be winding on down. Warmth moves back into the southern plain states areas. High pressure and control across the mid-Atlantic region. A frost potential into the central Appalachians. Otherwise, a pretty quiet weather picture early in the week across the southeastern states there.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hi-Pro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
October 7th was National Propane Day, celebrating that vital energy source across the country. Joining me now for an update on the propane industry is Mike Newland. He serves as the Agriculture Business Development Director with the Propane Education and Research Council. And Mike, thanks for joining us this week.
Thank you very much.
I want to talk to you about a topic I'm hearing more about, and that's renewable propane. Mike, what is that?
Well, from a molecular standpoint, it's identical to conventional propane. The equipment you're burning it in would have no idea that it's a different fuel because it's virtually not. It comes from a different source is really the only difference.
So let's talk about the sourcing then. How is that different versus conventional propane?
Yeah, so renewable propane would come essentially from fats, oils, and greases that are being made into biodiesel or sustainable aviation fuel. And that's really where those streams come from for our renewable propane. There is a really neat one out there that we're seeing more and more gallons of renewable propane made, and that's camelina. Camelina is a cover crop grown in very dry areas. I've been out west, looked at the crop myself. I just wanted to see it in person, see what it was. And that particular plant is a cover crop, as I mentioned, fantastic for the soils, gives everything a chance to rest, get recharged before you go back into your main crop. But camelina has double the volume of oil in the seed that soybeans do. So it's a very oil-dense grain. And from that, we produce incredibly low carbon intensity propane, along with the biodiesel, the sustainable aviation fuel.
So as you're looking at that incredibly environmentally respectful propane coming from the camelina plant, who's buying it? What's the market for renewable propane gas today?
Yeah, today it goes mostly into fleets, on-road fleets. So trucks that would be delivering mail between USPS centers, things of that type. we are seeing it start to move into some residential areas in the country as well. Within the agriculture space, we've not yet seen it migrate into the ag space. I think it may be a few years before we see that happen.
That makes sense. And from an environmental perspective, how much cleaner is renewable propane from the conventional?
Well, and I think that's a great question. It's great to point out. Conventional propane today is incredibly clean. I guess that's really the point that I want to make sure everybody hears. We don't have a dirty fuel today. Renewable propane, though, is about 80% cleaner than conventional propane, so from camelina. So camelina produced renewable propane is about 80% better than conventional propane that you're using today.
And do you expect to see the renewable propane gallons being made in this country continue to grow as you look down the line, Mike?
They absolutely will. We've identified a lot of different paths. There's a number of universities working on new paths to produce renewable propane. Everybody's working on cleaner fuels, and this is another one of them. The beautiful thing is it's a true drop-in fuel, meaning we don't have to adjust any equipment. The equipment has no idea that it's burning a different fuel because molecular it's identical.
And it's there today, which is always nice when we're looking to improve the environment. Mike Newland, Director of Agriculture Business Development with PERC, thanks so much for talking to us this week.
You bet. Thank you.
You can get more resources for putting propane to work on your operation by visiting propane.com. And on operations across the country, harvest is moving ahead. Our friend Chad Colby sent us this drone imagery of harvest moving forward in central Illinois. And as I've talked to growers across the country, while they've celebrated the dry weather and the speed at which the crop is coming out, it's also created challenges. Chief amongst them, very dry soybeans, a lot of shattering in the field, and combine fires remain a risk. Joining me now to discuss this developing drought situation is meteorologist Greg Sollier. Greg, thanks for joining me at the desk.
Pleasure to be here, out of my element. But yeah, let's talk drought here because it has really rapid and deepened over the past about a month and a half to 2 months, all because of the tropical Atlantic basin.
Put that into perspective for us. Why does action in the tropics change the weather in Iowa and Ohio and everywhere else?
North and west of the storm track, we tend to build high pressure when those tropical systems move into the Gulf or up the eastern seaboard like we've seen the past few weeks, past couple of months. When that happens, it strengthens that hot, warm dome over the middle part of the country, preventing weather systems to move on through, getting Gulf moisture in. So you get these warm days, cool nights, optimum conditions for harvest, a little on the dry side. I know in my area up near the Wisconsin, Northern Illinois line, we are done. There's nothing out there. They've turned over and tilled over the fields already. A lot of dust out there, and unfortunately little change in sight. And really the worst of it, the epicenter, across parts of the western Dakotas and especially across Ohio.
Let's zoom in on that Ohio drought. It has been existent since July.
Yep.
Greg, when are those producers going to see some relief?
It's not like throwing a switch, like we're moving from this neutral state to a La Nina and all of a sudden the moisture comes back in. It's a process. It's going to take the fall and winter season. We want to get moisture in the ground, which we think there'll be more rain versus snow to start, so milder to work with. But again, you don't want it to come down all at once. Look at the rains that come down in Florida, the southeast with the tropics. We don't want something like that. A slow percolation process is what's needed. Not going to happen probably well into November, if not December. We could be looking at some of these drought issues still into the growing season next year.
So as you look out to that next season's growing season, Greg, what are some of the major factors you're keeping an eye on?
Keeping an eye on how the winter season plays out. First of all, getting moisture in the ground, snow or rain before it firms up and freezes up. How is snow cover going to come into play in the meltdown process as well? And of course, the frequency of weather systems. So it's three-pronged approach. And assuming that we move into this La Nina, maybe all at once where we go into this stormy weather cycle and maybe character building, a good way to call it later this season across the plains and Midwest. You know what that means.
And you see that character building weather potentially, it would be after January.
After January, and could, at least from this vantage point in October, mean a slower start to the planting season. But again, moisture then would be into play and a wetter pattern hopefully plays out. Delays, but hopefully some moisture early next year.
All right, lots to watch for. And Greg, next week on This Week in Agribusiness, we will be doing your longer range winter outlook on the program.
Exactly.
Looking forward to see what all this later season's going to bring.
That's right. Character building, I think, easy to start and getting rough as the season wears on.
Well, stay tuned, folks. We'll have more to come when we come back.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson. Farmers across Ohio have seen a challenging growing season this year, and recently Max Armstrong had the chance to talk with Ohio farmer Evan Schaefer for our Plan Smart, Grow Smart series with our friends at BASF. They talked about the challenges in this growing season as well as those they've faced in years prior.
Talk about last year. I understand it was a pretty good corn crop for you here last year. The fungicides play a role in that?
Yeah, so I guess I would go back 3 years ago was the first time we saw tar spot. We had not seen it any in the season. It was just, it had come in so late. I think it could have definitely been yield limiting. It's been coming in later. 100% of our acres get sprayed with Veltima every year. That is something that we do because we know that disease pressure can run rampant if we do not address it. And I contribute some of not seeing tar spot until harvest time or when it wouldn't be yield limiting, when it's time to run Veltima. We're running it at VT and the residuals lasting long enough that we're keeping the tar spot out of our fields, and I can attribute quite a yield bump to having healthier crops later in the season to get that grain fill.
Think back to when you first saw the results from Veltima. What impressed you?
Veltima has been a huge benefit to us because we're able to go a little bit earlier. Most people say full tassel. Veltima gives us that first tassel ability. And, you know, when, like we said, timing's key. When we're fighting a rain or something, that gives us that early window that we can still feel protected later on in the season. I think the biggest thing is the longevity of the residual. We've sprayed fungicide for quite a few years. With these now, we're fighting some tougher diseases and we're seeing clean fields, you know, maybe 30 days later. It's just the length of residual has been phenomenal.
So it appears that the problem continues and it gets worse, but BASF with its products, they're advancing to stay ahead of it.
Yes, we have somebody to push us and, you know, teach us about what's coming down the line and how we address some of the problems that we have.
Talk a little bit also about the way you approach fungicide application.
So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We've all heard that, and that is the truth. In a year like this, I am a farmer. We all have to look at the dollars. When we're staring down the barrel of $3.50 corn, but you've already spent all those other dollars. We need to make sure that we're protecting the yield that we've created, and fungicide is pretty much standard on our farm. We use it on almost every acre. So grain fill is extremely important to get that yield. Fungicide brings that piece to the table. We're able to keep plant health longer. It also increases standability, so easier to shell. Standability is huge, and just that late season plant health is very important.
Thank you, Max, and you can see our full series online at plansmartgrowsmart.com.
Greg Solier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Earlier in the program, Greg Solier ran through the weather impacts that could be affecting parts of the country, and rain was on some of those. Greg, who's going to see what?
Maybe later in the week across the southern plains. It's iffy at best. We've got to get a couple of things under control and going. That would be, unfortunately, another system developing in the western parts of the Gulf. We've got lowering pressures here. There could be a name system, and then south of the Keys and Cuba into the southern Caribbean, which will begin to trek on northward. So assuming that happens, there'll be some additional rain, and hopefully some of it into the south end of winter wheat late in the week and into the following weekend. If this doesn't materialize, forget about the rain here. Little, if any, across the Corn Belt, so all ahead forward on outdoor work and harvest operations. Little to none across the Mid-Atlantic region, the Appalachian Tennessee Valley for cleanup and recovery from Helene, and some scattered typical stuff down through Florida. Nothing across the Southwest, Northern Plains, and a scant amount of moisture, Mike, for the Pacific Northwest, 1/4 to 1/2 inch later in the week.
Well, let's look out a little farther, Greg. The week of October 14th, what do you see?
And coming along through the middle part of the month, and by the way, we'll remind you here that coming up in the new week, next Wednesday, we'll have a podcast with the Feed Stuff 365 folks. Sarah Muirhead and I will talk the winter outlook. So join us this coming Wednesday at feedstuff365.com. In any event, we still got some cool air as the weather pattern continues to bring in northwesterly winds up aloft. Tropical systems are moving this way, so a little fall in the air. Mississippi Valley on east. There's some lingering warmth over the southwestern reaches of the country, but all ahead forward and outdoor work. Now, this is a double-edged sword. Great outdoor work and harvest weather. Not so great for the Central Plains with winter wheat planting in mind. Tropical moisture, yeah, who cares if it's October? This is going to be a busy season. It is already, and up and down the eastern seaboard. Probably going to go into late November and early December with the tropics and the Atlantic staying busy, Mike.
All right, Greg. Well, that warmth in the west, does that move east at all as you get into the week of October 21st?
That's the way the weather pattern has gone. You bring systems up across the western Atlantic through the northern shipping routes to the North Sea, and then once they're out of the picture, the jet stream builds back northward, and so does the warmth relative to the time of year. So back into probably some near record-setting 80-plus degree readings over parts of the plains. Warmth to the Corn Belt locale, southwestern states. The cold air retreats across central and southern Canada. Still unsettled up and down the eastern seaboard, particularly Florida, the eastern Gulf Coast, high and dry. Again, early and often on harvest operations. Remember, safety first for the Corn Belt, back into the plains. Below average moisture for California as well. So the tropics stay busy. The rain gauges don't across the heartland.
Well, as we get into November, Greg, does it feel like fall anywhere?
Outside these little reminders from time to time, it doesn't. I think it may be one of these years where you just completely bypass autumn, move right into winter, and that will be the story, I think, this year. But look at the warmth here relative to November. Probably record and near record setting in some areas of the middle part of the country. Normal temperatures here. A bit of a cool-off slated for the western reaches of the country. We will see some moisture welcome in the Pacific Northwest, still busy across the tropics, and an active weather pattern will continue on across the mid-Atlantic region. High and dry across the plains, Corn Belt locales. Again, a fast completion to harvest, but at the same time, a worsening of drought across much of the heartland.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is sponsored by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of versatile high-speed discs and achieve better results with every pass. Visit Brandt.ca for more. Well, if you subscribe to the print edition of Farm Futures magazine, it is hitting your mailbox this week. And joining us this week on the show is executive editor Pam Caraway. Pam, what's the cover story for this month on Farm Futures?
So our cover farmer is Ben Reenchi from Iowa, and he's talking about different things that you can do to weather this downturn. I think the thing we need to remember is that downturn does not mean down and out. It means that we need to tighten up. We need to look at everything we're doing and see what we need to do to survive, to get through what we have going on, to go to the top side. We know that an upcycle is coming.
I like that. We know that an upside cycle is coming. We just got to wait for it and survive until then. And of course, these markets are moving. Pam, farmfutures.com, you're always featuring new bloggers and their market insight, aren't you?
Absolutely. And for everybody who is focused on the WASDE report on Friday, they can look for Bryce Norr's take on that on our farmfutures.com on Monday. Bryce always has some significant insight. He's been collecting data for a number of years, and he provides a great forecast. Not just the numbers, but what do those numbers mean?
That's what it all comes back to. We can hear and see all of these numbers, all of these data points day in and day out, but we've got to interpret them for our operation. Pam, before we let you go, for folks who want to get access to the information at Farm Futures, what's the best place to go, and how do you get the print copy?
Go straight to farmfutures.com. You can subscribe to the print copy. You can also subscribe to our twice daily newsletters. Farm Futures Daily keeps up with the markets. First thing in the morning, you're going to find out what happened overnight.
Pam Caraway, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. There is some interesting background on some of those folks who made tractors back in the day. Among them, a guy by the name of Jerome Increase Case. I'll show you one of his this weekend in Max's Tractor Shed, brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, when you look into the background, indeed, of some of those early tractor manufacturers, Jerome Increase Case among them, it is kind of an interesting story. He came from New York, headed to Wisconsin. He was in the Wisconsin State Legislature at one time, and I think he was the mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, for 3 different terms. He did buy some land west of Chicago in what was Hinsdale, Illinois. It's kind of interesting when you take a look at the history of that suburb of Chicago. It eventually became the site of the International Harvester farm. And of course, those two companies eventually did get together. This is a 1952 Model D made by Case. It's owned by Rimmer Shoots at Ashton, Illinois. It's about a 37 horsepower tractor, and back in the day when it was brand new in '52, it cost about $2,500. Case made the Model D from 1939 to 1954, producing about 14,000 of them. A great example is this one, owned by Rimmer Shoots of Ashton, Illinois. Mark Stock is here now with his weekend report of what's on the block at Big Iron in the week ahead.
Well, good morning, Max. Auction that's getting a tremendous amount of attention from all across the world is the Jack Lukeman Collector Car Sale. Items located in Jacksonville, Illinois, will start to sell here on Monday, October 14th with day one, over 100 classic and collectible cars. Also, a large amount of pedal cars, bicycles, and collectible signage. Once again, this sale is Monday and Tuesday, October 14th and 15th. Also on Tuesday, October the 15th, a very large auction for Western Equipment LLC with various locations all across Texas and into Oklahoma. They will be selling late model 2021, 22, and 23 model machines. They have several John Deere S780 four-wheel drive combines. There's a John Deere CP690 cotton picker. It's a 2019 model. There's also late model John Deere 9900i four-wheel drive forage harvester selling. All kinds of tractors. 2023 year model John Deere 8R370 mechanical front tractor. There are 192 items being sold on this sale for Western Equipment LLC. Max, with the run-up of the commodity prices the last month in corn and beans, we're seeing more activity on our website. If you have something to sell, please call us so we can expose it to the hundreds of thousands of people that use BigIron.com every week.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And this week, we're meeting Cadence Boonder. She's the FFA State Secretary for Iowa. And Cadence, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you hail from the far northwest part of the state of Iowa. Tell us a little bit about agriculture up in your neck of the woods.
So yeah, I'm from the very, very northwest corner of the state. We're very heavily in that row crop operation. We have excellent land up by us. So my grandparents have a row crop farm that I help with. And then my family, we also have some cattle, some sheep, some pigs, some chickens, lots of confinements up by us for hogs as well.
Absolutely. So Cadence, what was it that made you want to be a part of the FFA?
Originally started in 4-H and kind of found my spark for agriculture, for showing livestock, and I really loved opportunities that FFA had to get me to continue to grow as a professional and really advocate for agriculture. I had the passion, but I really didn't know how to show that passion to others or convey it with others. So they gave me that ability to talk to others about my passion for agriculture and really advocate for the industry that I love.
That makes sense. And as you look out to this year of service, do you hope to spread that to current members as well?
Yeah, I hope to really be able to share my love for agriculture and for the organization, as well as being a state reporter. I get to run all of our social media pages with the state secretary. So being able to highlight other members' passions for agriculture. We do a Member Monday segment. So those type of ways to highlight others' impacts in an organization.
That's great. What are the social media pages we should be following?
Everything is at Iowa FFA, so pretty easy.
Fantastic, folks. Give them a follow. Let's keep up with what's happening in the Iowa FFA. And Cadence Boonder, thank you so much for speaking with us this week.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by PTx, a new brand from AGCO that includes precision ag technologies from Precision Planting and PTx Trimble. If you had the chance to make it to the Farm Progress Show in Boone, Iowa this year and get out to the field demonstration area, you saw 14 brand new combines running in this year's crop. Many new manufacturers were rolling out technological updates to their machines, and at Case IH, it was the year of the combine with a slew of new combine releases during the growing season. Many of us had a chance to see them up close and personal at shows throughout the year, but our tech correspondent Chad Colby was able to get out this harvest and find a brand new Case combine running in the field. He brings us this update.
So at the Farm Progress Show this year, Case IH unveiled their brand new combines, and they promised they'd be out in the field this fall. I caught up with our friends at the Wade Farms. I've got Brad Wade sitting in the combine here with me. Brad, there's always big jumps in technology over the years. What's your impressions of this combine? You've had it out in the field here for the first day.
Well, so far, so good. This thing just feels like you're riding on rails. It's just a lot bigger machine, very stable. It's got, I think, 700 horsepower, so that's not an issue. And we're just ripping through some upper 200 bushel corn here at 20%, like going through like the water.
I remember when we got our first rotor in the late 70s, one of the things I noticed at the Farm Progress Show, and you could see it on the screen over here, I'll try to get the camera over. Brad, certainly that rotor is so much physically bigger just to lead to a lot more capacity in this combine.
I'll call it the single twin rotor. It's just one very long rotor that it's just, everything's bigger than the original.
Yeah.
And it's just improved. And I mean, we're just getting a taste of it here for a couple days. But so far, it's just pretty impressive.
And it's interesting because this combine certainly has all the automation. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, that allows you guys on your operation to really, truly put the next generation in the seat or a hired man and entrust that the combine still does a good job in the field. What's your opinion of automation? It's come a long way.
Well, it has come a long way. We've been looking at this kind of machine for several years now. It's had some growing pains, and so far today, this really looks to be doing a great job. It's I think the machine is built big enough, strong enough that it can be pushed, and that was probably a problem in past machines. When you get in higher yields, high moisture corn, it just didn't handle that situation very well. But man, this one's doing a number on it. It's a lot of fun to drive, actually.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad, for that update. Always appreciate getting a look at new combines in the field. And folks, don't go anywhere. Before we leave for the week, we'll take a look at harvest in Missouri. Leave it here. Across the country, Pioneer field agronomists are keeping an eye on what happens between the rows in America's farm fields. This week, we're talking with Jamie Farmer. He's a Pioneer agronomist based out of Lexington, Missouri. And Jamie, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Fill us in on soybeans down in your part of Missouri. How are they looking this season?
Yeah, soybeans are looking great. We had a tough season here on the finish, but positively surprised as we're getting out there and harvesting some soybean acres here in West Central Missouri. Potential to see several record yields come out this year.
You mentioned growers had some challenges this year. What were the issues they faced?
Yeah, we had a great start, and then the rain turned on and didn't shut off there this spring towards the end of April through much of the month of May. And so then trying to finish up late. Moisture was good through the first half of the season, but one of the driest finishes we've had on record for us here, at least in West Central Missouri. So a lot of concern going into harvest, whether those beans finish strong enough through that droughty period there at the end.
Well, let's talk about how these beans are finishing. What new products from Pioneer are coming out to help growers address these sorts of challenges?
Yeah, so we've got the launch of our new Z-Series soybeans. So A-Series has dominated for us, actually one of the longest running series of soybeans we've had. Industry leading and been a great tool for our customers here in West Central Missouri. We're bringing the Z-Series on, seeing a 4 times genetic increase in our gain there across this class versus all previous classes. And bringing up some of those native disease-resistant traits like standability and ultimately yield. So that's what we're most excited about this fall, seeing those yields come in here over the last 7 to 10 days. Guys are seeing the impressive results that Z-Series are put on.
Well, that's where I want to pick your brain a little bit. Let's get some more details on how this Z-Series is yielding. You mentioned you've had a couple plots come out, you've had some farmers run. What are the early results so far?
Yeah, early results have been very impressive. So we've got some plots that are ringing the bell right up there, 99, 100 bushel. We've got some field averages coming in of some of those Z-Series. We were able to get on some guys that were yielding in the low hundreds. And so for us to see that, especially in a year like this, that's been very impressive for us. SDS, Phytophthora, these diseases always impact us here in West Central Missouri. And the Z-Series beans, including our A-Series, but even to bring the Z-Series on and see that next step in yield and performance has got a lot of guys excited going into this fall to finish harvest and really get a better look at them even next year for 2025.
As you're thinking ahead to 2025, Jamie, which fields are you really going to target those Z-Series beans for?
Yeah, fortunately for us, we've got a solid lineup, at least here in West Central Missouri, of Z-Series beans. There's honestly not an acre that I can't find a fit for one of these Z-Series beans on, at least in my geography. And so whether that's in the hills or in the Missouri River bottom, some of these Sweet Creek bottoms that we might have where standability is a concern, these beans have proven they can stand really well. And then when it comes to, the drought, we were able to evaluate them in a drought for us last year. And then to have a turnaround year like this where it's record yields for a lot of folks, at least here in the breadbasket between the Missouri River and I-70, those really productive fields, we've got a fit for those as well. So you name me an acre in West Central Missouri, I've got a Z-Series beans that'll fit there.
All right, Jamie, before we let you go, any harvest predictions here for West Central Missouri?
Above average, pleasantly surprised considering the droughty finish. Like I mentioned, there's several folks out here in West Central Missouri that are going to see some record bean yields this year across some of these fields of theirs. And so for that, it's pretty exciting. We're going to need the bushels. We're going to have to bushel through where we're at commodity price wise. And we're excited to be able to offer that with our Z-Series, moving forward.
Jamie Farmer, Pioneer Field Agronomist, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Thank you, Mike.
And you can learn more about what's coming from Pioneer by visiting pioneer.com. Thank you, folks, for joining us this week. If you are one of those who will be in the combine this next week, stay safe. Get those fire extinguishers, keep them handy, make sure they are charged. Thanks for joining us this time, folks. Be sure to catch us next time right here for This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.